again. I think there'll be 2 recordings, I think.
Oh, I think I know why, because I switched off the PC that was a host.
Okay. All right.
Cannot simply switch off.
Then all of a sudden, hey, all gone already. Okay. Okay. But anyway, I think then it's amazing, isn't it? How then Tamar and become part of the lineage, and not only Tamar, we find that later on Rahab is involved, and then we find that Bathsheba is involved in the lineage, and in a certain sense, you can see that God uses what we call it's a matter of God's mercy, God's grace. And God doesn't necessarily use perfect people. God uses imperfect people who may have questionable in certain sense, but God doesn't use immoral people, and but some of them may not have that kind of a Pharisaic or Sadduceic or that kind of a legalistic purity, but they have certain qualities, and that quality of faith, quality of trust, and rather than just pure morality. And sexual morality is important, but it is not necessarily the most important matter necessarily. Okay. I think the words of Paul says that, yeah, all going to prostitutes and all that, and is wrong, and something that you should not do as a normal routine part of your life. And but people do make mistakes. People to commit sexual sin. Sometimes it is a sin of a failing of the flesh, of a weakness, rather than of a called settled arrogance. One of the interesting contrasts is how God rejected Saul, who never did anything morally wrong in terms of sexual relations and all that, and how God rejected him because he was proud, he was arrogant, and he was hypocritical, and he tried to present himself as an upright person. And so when Samuel confronted him, he said to Samuel, let me do this sacrifice and come and do this so that I will still be right in the eyes of the people. Whereas David, who committed adultery, who committed murder, and when was confronted by the prophet Nathan, he repented wholeheartedly, and he suffered, and because his family was a shambles after that, but he was called a man after God's own heart. So it is interesting to note that how God uses fallen people and vulnerable people and imperfect people. Okay, but you cannot use this passage in Tamar and as to say that sexual sin is not disgraceful. It is disgraceful, but it's even through such a disgraceful act, See, and God makes something beautiful out of it. Okay. Okay. Lawrence, does that help?
Don't know what to comment. Don't know how to
Well, look at it. God used and people who were former drug addicts and people who were then former playboys and but then some people who raised up in a very strong religious families and are rejected by God, and because they are so proud and they are so hard and they are so what we call no grace in their lives, self-righteous person God cannot use.
You see, Pastor.
Yeah.
This relationship of Lot with the daughters, somehow they were punished. The offsprings were punished. But this Judah with Tamar, the twins, survived.
Yeah.
And of course, then the lineage of Jesus come into being.
Yeah. Okay. Lot is not part of what we call the promised line. Okay. Lot, when he then separated from Abraham, he cut himself off from the promised, and but Moab and Ammon were given what we called and certain what we called lesser promises, even in the later prophetic books. And so you say Moab and who was punished? No, Ruth was a Moabitess who came into the David line, right? She was the mother and grandmother of David, great grandmother of David, or the grandmother of David. So the Moabite and which is part of Lot's and descendants. So again, I think when you talk about grace and mercy, it is not something that you demand. It is something that is fully given by God, something that is undeserved. And okay. Okay. Judah then redeemed himself to a certain extent later on and in the Joseph story. And he proven that he had learned his lesson. And there was a transformation. That's right. Just because one line then is given reprieve, that line needs to continue and to continue what we call then to then go in the direction of God's grace and God's mercy. You find that in David's and lineage, and there were some of the kings that he had and went bad. Okay.
I will only be very surprised.
Yeah.
Why Judah cannot recognize his own daughter-in-law?
Sometimes he didn't recognize it. She covered his veil herself, and he. So
you will have the veil will be off, right?
Well, when Jacob was with Leah, he didn't know that it was not Rachel. Then isn't found in the next morning. So when you have sexual relations as with a prostitute, you don't really care about the person's face. You just want to. There's nothing unusual about it, and okay, nothing to. He just didn't recognize her. Okay. Sometimes and recognition and I remembered and one time then I met somebody and from Bethel Tabernacle and in church and they don't have makeup and they come very plainly, and then on Monday when they go to office and they need to and present themselves and according to company standards and there were a couple of times I didn't recognize certain of my church members and when they were properly made up, right?
I thought the the alcohol makes some difference.
Probably alcohol or something. He went to the ship and probably he was a little bit drunk and he could have, but those are incidences that are not pertinent to the main story. He didn't recognize and so he had and he just wanted to fulfill his urge and his wife died. He didn't have sex for a while. And he went to this festival and everybody was happy and happy hour. There was a prostitute and ready.
I feel that Tamar went in with intention, with purpose.
Yeah, Tamar went to seduce him. Definitely. Tamar was very particular. She did not go and try to find out anybody. And if he doesn't, Tamar's reasoning is that if he doesn't give his son to me to give me with a child, then I'll go to the source. And he can't seduce and Sheila, so he seduced the father-in-law. Definitely, she intentionally target and she is possible that she might have an offers from other men and things like that, and they came and she would not. She wanted, and in that sense, she was an righteous, and she wanted. Her purpose is not to have and to fulfill some kind of a lust. Some kind she wanted to provide of a legitimate heir, and which is not only an heir, but a legitimate and a fulfillment of the promise that God gave to Abraham. In that sense, and Tamar was more and righteous than when Judah was willing to forego and any descendants and when he refused to give Sheila, and he was and dilly-dallying on that. But Tamar was more intentional that God's promise be fulfilled. In that sense, they find that Tamar comes up much better and in the salvation story than Judah. Okay. All right. 9:30 already. I think that that's enough for tonight. We'll pick up some other case studies the next time.
Yeah.
Is
Thank
that
you, Pastor.
okay? Anyone else have want to ask any questions?
Good night, Pastor.
Good night. Good night.
Take care of yourself.
All right. You
Good
can
night.
Yeah.
you can ask questions on the web on the chat
Yeah.
and so.
Ya, selamat
Yeah.
mengundi semua.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Good night.
All right.
Uh,
Go and vote, Go and vote.
yeah.
Good night, Pastor. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good night. Okay, good night. All right. Okay. Okay. Mm.